Hello. What exactly are you doing? I'm just trying to scare you. Ooh. You know, that kind of thing. Okay, listen, Caspar, I just paid 40 quid for a hot dog. You have to do a little bit more than that to scare me. So, the most haunted theme park in the UK. This is a video I've actually been sitting on for a good few months now. This is a video I initially wanted to do way back in October, but unfortunately I just really ran out of time and didn't have any time to do it, which really sucks, to be fair. So yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We're doing it in January instead. Fight me. So as some of you may have guessed, of course we are going to be talking about the wonderful Alton Towers. Now the first part of this video I'm going to discuss a little bit about Alton Towers' history and why it could potentially be so haunted, and then after that I'm going to kind of scour the internet for some spooky stories, and then hopefully we're going to kind of try and decipher whether we think they're believable or not, and whether or not they're scary even at all. So with that being said, I am going to preface this video by saying I'm not really a massive believer in ghosts. I believe there's a possibility, but I'm not kind of hardcore tinfoil hat. And also, before we get into the video, if you do go on to enjoy it, make sure you like and subscribe. Happy New Year to you all. I'm very happy with how the channel's kind of been turning out over the last couple of months, and I'm glad that there's been a few of you guys who are sticking around, and I absolutely love every single one of you that are. So yeah, if you do enjoy it, like and subscribe would be more than appreciated. So the towers have always kind of been known to be at least a little bit creepy. Not necessarily haunted, but they've always kind of had a bit of a creepy aura to them, just by the nature of the architecture and the time that, of course, the towers were constructed. But the actual kind of spooky history goes back a little bit further than that, with the actual site that the towers and the park itself sits on dating all the way back to 1000 BC, which, if any of you can't really tell, that is very old. And there's actually kind of been, you know, ghost sightings, in quotation marks, you know, all the way back to like the 19th century. And of course this has led to even loads of different urban legends that have kind of sparked across the years, including the Chained Oak, which is obviously a very, you know, kind of infamous story around Alton Towers, because it inspired Hex, which is obviously one of my absolute favourite rides. But you know, it's got such an interesting history, the town of Alton and, you know, Alton Towers itself. So it's going to be interesting kind of hearing some of these stories, I think, and hopefully some of them will turn out to be at least a little bit true.
Try not to get scared. Scariest stories.
Okay, so some of you out there may know this story quite well, but I did really want to talk about it because, you know, it is kind of the most famous Alton Towers ghost story, you know, if it can even be called that. I think it leans a bit more to the urban legend side, but there is some kind of spooky happenings that involve the supernatural within this story. Now, I'll try not to rant too much about this because it is my absolute favourite ride at Alton Towers. However, obviously, if you've ridden Hex, you know how much the actual story of the Hex ride ties into the local folklore and urban legends, and this is kind of where my love for this ride really thrives. So again, I'll try not to go off the rails on this one. I'll also kind of be going over some of the actual kind of ghost sightings that have happened and been told from within the Hex show building, because obviously due to the ride's spooky nature, that's quite an interesting topic. So the story goes like this. The 15th Earl of Shrewsbury, Charles Talbot, was riding home in a mundane and routine endeavour through the town of Alton, back to his home at the time, which of course was Alton Towers as we know it today. Well, not necessarily as we know it today, but you know, it looked a little bit different back then. It was actually kind of like a home. And as he was riding home, he kind of spotted something within the road, and it was kind of this old beggar woman, you know, who was kind of in a bit tattered clothes, kind of was asking the Earl of Shrewsbury for some change, or just any kind of spare money that he has lying about, which of course he's rich, so he definitely had. This kind of aggravated Charles Talbot, so he kind of just went the way with her. The woman kind of started to chant a curse, which obviously anyone today would probably kind of be at least a little bit freaked out by. She kind of explained during this curse that for every branch that fell off the oak tree behind her, one of the Earl's family members will mysteriously and strangely die. Which sounds really dark, but you know, stay with me. So with the Earl of Shrewsbury, Mr. Charles Talbot, not really being a superstitious person, not really believing in any of this curse malarkey, he kind of just went about his day and decided to ride back to the towers, and kind of just didn't really think much of it. However, this just so happened to be a very windy night, and of course with windy nights comes a lot of destruction in the UK, as we've kind of seen over the last year or so. So during this kind of stormy night, while the Earl was sleeping, one of the branches actually was snapped off of the oak tree and landed on the ground. Now, to any kind of other regular Joe, this would just kind of be a branch falling off of a tree. And to be fair to Charles Talbot, it actually was. You know, this wasn't something he was massively worried about, because he didn't really care about what the woman had said and just kind of thought she was trying to scare him, which she was trying to do, and as you'll see eventually, she actually did. So that very morning, Charles Talbot kind of did his normal morning routine, as one does, and then kind of found out that it just so happened to be that one of his family members mysteriously died during the night. Now, obviously, this kind of sent Charles into a bit of a frenzy, understandably. Obviously, he's heartbroken at the death of one of his family members, but also this old whack job in the middle of the woods kind of put a curse on a tree that probably had a few branches broken off it during the night. So he was a bit panicked, you know, and that's kind of putting it lightly. But of course, the Earl couldn't rule this out at this point. You know, this old woman had kind of done this curse upon him supposedly the day before, and just so happened a branch fell off and one of his family members died. So in a kind of desperate attempt, he headed straight into the woods and ordered that the entire tree was covered in chains. Now, this is obviously kind of where the famous tree, you know, kind of comes from, and the story of Hex starts to begin. But at this kind of point in time, this was just the Earl's way of kind of supposedly trying to keep his family safe. You know, this woman had kind of threatened him yesterday and something happened, so he's just covering this thing in chains in the desperate attempt to make sure that nothing else happens to it. Of course, the tree then sat there covered in chains, swinging in the wind for decades upon decades, and is still standing there to this day. Now, obviously, like I stated earlier in the video, this is an urban legend. There's not really much historical evidence to back it up other than the tree itself, but it is a really cool story that I love to hear from now and now again, and I'd actually love to visit the Chained Oak at some point next year, you know, just to kind of experience what it's like to see it there. I know a lot of people have already done it, but I just personally have never, you know, gone into the woods to find it, but it's definitely on my list of things to do. Now, of course, there have actually been some actual ghost sightings. I say actual ghosts with kind of parenthesis. You know, there's been ghost sightings within the Hex show building itself, and one of those kind of frequent sightings that a lot of people have reported supposedly is seeing Victorian children and having stones thrown at them, which is a bit of an odd combination, I can't lie, but part of me does kind of think a lot of this kind of stems from the fact that the ride itself is a bit creepy, so are people just kind of coming up with stuff to try and kind of add to that narrative a little bit. But you know, I can't lie, I would be absolutely terrified seeing a Victorian child, and getting pebbles hurled at your face isn't exactly the nicest thing to experience either, so I can understand why some people would find something like this a bit scary, and who knows, maybe they did actually see you know, a Victorian ghost within the towers themselves, which would be a pretty cool, well, I say pretty cool, it'd be terrifying, but it would be pretty cool.
It would be a feature, a creature feature, featuring the creature.
Okay, so this next story is probably going to be one of the stranger ones that I'm going to tell, to be quite honest. However, we're going to tell it anyway. So the story starts with a woman called Margaret Buckle, who in 1978 had worked at Alton Towers for over 12 years. So she's put in a good shift in, bless her. She's done a lot of work for the Towers itself, and yeah, she was just a really valued member of the Alton Towers kind of work staff. And on one particular day, she was doing her regular cleaning duties, going into some of the toilets, you know, wiping them down, cleaning them, making sure everything's sanitary, and she all of a sudden heard one of the doors slam shut. Now, this is obviously, you know, a regular occurrence in toilets. You know, wind can often cause these things to happen, you know, or she thought it might have even been occupied, which is also, you know, as traumatizing as that would be to have the door flung open in front of you while you're trying to go to the toilet. You know, this was definitely a possibility that was running through her head. So, because of that, she then decided to call out, "Good morning," you know, just as a formal greeting, just to make sure that she's kind of making sure whoever's in there knows that she's about to turn the corner and potentially see them taking a shit. It would be at this point that she would then hear the outside door bang, so the actual kind of door that leads into the toilet block, that would also bang shut. And you know, this isn't exactly on a particularly windy day either. This kind of takes place in the summer. It was kind of like a cool, warm summer's day. You know, we're quite rare these days, but they do exist. Of course, Margaret knew this was very out of the ordinary, but she kind of chalked it up up to her colleagues trying to play a bit of a prank on her. Like I said, she'd been working at Towers for a long time at this point, you know, so she was kind of well informed of the staff that worked there and was quite close with a lot of them. So he just kind of assumed that they were trying to pull a prank. This then continued for multiple occasions over the summer, and it got to the second or third attempt when she kind of again cried out good morning to no avail at all, when something pretty strange apparently happened. The events once again played out as they pretty much had done for the last 3 or 4 times. She was cleaning, all of a sudden the door banged and the outside door banged, but this time something else kind of happened. She decided to go and look in the cubicle once again, shout good morning once again. She was just kind of trying to be polite just in case it was someone that was either going to the toilet or it was her friends that were messing with her. So as she walked over to the cubicle, she opened the door and all of a sudden felt a rush of cold air across her body. Now obviously, like I said, this is in the summer, so not traditionally cold. I mean, you know, well, to be fair, there's been some pretty hard cases that potentially prove it otherwise over the last couple of years in England. But way back in 1978, there was some pretty hot summers going on, so it was a bit odd that there was this kind of cold rush of air. So as she felt this cold feeling kind of take over her body, she then turned around, kind of, you know, a bit confused about what had actually happened, and then was met with a dark figure cloaked in a cloak. I don't know why I said it like that. Now, she did go on to mention that she did think it was a woman. She didn't really know because, as you'll find out in a second, she didn't hang around for very long. So she saw this kind of figure in a black cloak, kind of shrouded in darkness almost, and then just absolutely bolted it out of the toilet. And do you know what? I do not blame her in the slightest. If I saw that, I'd have been in Africa by next week. So to be fair, she did exactly what we all would have done. She ran straight out, didn't really bother to look at what the actual figure looked like. And as she was running out, she ran straight into her boss, who kind of laughed and chuckled and kind of asked her if she was okay. And then at that point, she was like, oh, I've saw this thing in the toilets and blah, 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 you know, kind of acting really hysterical. And her boss actually turned around, chuckled and kind of said, yeah, you got a ghost, it happens, there's been a lot of people reported the sighting, no harm will come to you, it's just it's something we get. Almost like he's listing off, you know, just like the events for the day. It's like, oh yeah, what's that one? Okay, yeah, clean the toilet. Okay, number 5. Oh yeah, spooky ghost. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a regular occurrence. Now, this kind of, to me, is probably the most believable story out of the 3 I'm going to talk to today, because this is an actual first-hand account. This is by someone who did work at the park and also worked for 12 years prior. So whether or not they were just trying to be fun and put this story on the internet, but yeah, this is quite a well-known story. I've seen it in a few different forums, so it was quite an interesting one to look into, and it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, some of the toilets would be haunted. I think if anywhere was haunted, you know, toilets is probably going to be one of the places. You know, I know a lot of Japanese legends guys love to go in the toilet, so yeah, why not over here? So yeah, that was a bit of an odd story. In the ghost defence, if I was a ghost, I would probably spend most of my time committing devious buffoonery to scare the absolute pants off most of the staff as well. But obviously, I wouldn't personally choose the toilets as my place of spooky haunting, I think, if that's even a phrase. But yeah, I'm not one to judge, so I'll let the ghost be.
There once existed a man's who killed peoples.
Okay, so this last story is actually my favourite one of the 3, plainly because it just goes off in a massively different direction at the end and is actually quite funny. But yeah, we'll get into that when we come to the point in the story. But to kind of set the scene, you know, a lot of people who haven't been to Alton Towers before maybe won't probably know this, but a lot of you that have gone to Alton Towers, or at least know a little bit about it, will know that a lot of the kind of beauty of Alton Towers comes from the gardens. And obviously, to keep and maintain the gardens in the state that they are, there obviously needs to be a head gardener. And in this particular story, it is Mr. George Noakes. Now, George Noakes was a pretty well-established person within the Alton Towers community. His mother actually worked at Alton Towers way before it was even really a commercial thing. So there was kind of a lot of history within his family of the towers and stuff. So you know, he really loved his job, kind of working as the gardener. Now, one day when George was kind of going about his duties, you know, doing the regular gardening stuff. I'm not a gardener, so I don't really know what that entails. But he was obviously kind of managing and maintaining, or doing what he was kind of supposed to be doing. And as he was doing this, he was kind of walking around the gardens, maybe looking for things to do, maybe tending to some flowers, I don't know, he didn't specify. And kind of as he was doing this and kind of walking around the gardens, he then kind of spotted someone out in the distance just wandering about. Now obviously, initially
believe. He just thought he was a guest. But the odd thing was he was in medieval garments, which is obviously not exactly something you see every day. So he was kind of a bit intrigued by the man. He kind of saw him in the distance walking about and thought, do you know what, I'm going to go up and try and start a conversation with him. But yeah, he went up and he tried to go and talk to this medieval man. As he started to get a little bit closer, George kind of decided to try and call out to the man and kind of just say, oh, hello, like, what, you know, what are you doing, kind of thing. You know, it's like, again, it's not exactly something you see every day. And then as he got a bit closer and kind of tried to turn one of the bushes to go and get a better look at this guy, he disappeared. He just disappeared into thin air, which obviously isn't exactly something us humans are able to do, you know, off the cuff. So he was kind of a bit weirded out by it, but just assumed he kind of lost track of the man. And maybe it was even a character that his family had hired to come and, you know, just be around the park for the guests, which is obviously something that, you know, was quite frequent back in the day, well before it became a proper theme park. So yeah, he kind of just assumed nothing of it and went back to his daily routine, and that continued on for basically ever. Like, he continued doing his daily routines. He continued working at the park right up until he retired, and then of course after that he passed away. But the kind of common thread throughout his entire career at Alton Towers was the fact that he kept seeing this man all of the time during his duties. He even said reluctantly towards the end of his life that he really didn't believe that he was a ghost. He literally exhausted every other option to try and find out whether or not this man was actually supposed to be there. He asked his family, he asked his bosses, and nothing. No one had even heard of the man. And he kind of grew over the years to realise that this man that he keeps seeing wasn't aging either. So either he has absolutely astounding skin complexion or it's a ghost. And he kind of reluctantly kind of came to that conclusion towards the end of his career. However, this is where the story now becomes slightly weirder. So completely unrelated to the supernatural, it actually turns out that George's mother was actually a handmaid during the time that Alton Towers was functioning as a manor house, which obviously was its intended purpose back when it was built. This was in like 1901 to 1910, and around this sort of time, the king was actually a frequent visitor to Alton Towers. This was King Edward VII, and he frequently visited just to kind of visit and see what's what. Now, George may or may not have been the reason why this was occurring. Now, to put a little bit of context, you know, King Edward was always kind of known apparently for being very shady around some of the lower kind of people, if that's even what you want to call them. I don't know, normal people in our eyes, me and you. You know, he was always kind of a bit shady around them, not doing anything harmful, but he was always kind of, yeah, you catch my drift. So yeah, King Edward kind of began to visit, and after about 6 or 7 months, you know, he kind of stopped visiting, and then about 1 or 2 months later, George popped out. So take that information what you will. For all we know, you know, the king was a bit of a player.
I'm the best man around. I am sexy. I'm a legend. I am the beast. Girls fall to their knees.
That's even what you want to call them back then.
Their boyfriends
but yeah, for all we know, George was, you know, related to the royal family, which I think is quite an interesting little tidbit for this story. But as a story as a whole, I think this one actually holds quite a bit of credit. I think, you know, considering that again he's got family that work at the towers, so he's not likely to lie about any of this stuff, and also the fact that he was a firm believer that it wasn't a ghost for a very long time. You know, he was pretty much dedicated to trying to figure out who this actually was, and this ghost that he kept seeing within the gardens just never really kind of turned up any evidence of being an actual person. That, along with the fact that he noticed that this person wasn't aging, also kind of contributed to the fact that, you know, it might have actually been a ghost. So who knows, it may have just been some random people playing a bit of a prank, but I think for that amount of time, you know, I think it's probably more than likely something a bit odd going on. But yeah, again, needless to say, it's a pretty interesting story. So that is going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you didn't, you feel free to leave a dislike or something. But if you did enjoy it, like I said at the beginning of the video, definitely like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I absolutely love you guys. I've got some really fun ideas coming up over the next few weeks that I'm really excited to share with you. And yeah, definitely let me know down in the comments below what you think of these stories as well. Do you think they're true? Do you think there's actually something supernatural going on at Alton Towers? Or even share some of your own experiences down in the comments. I'd absolutely love to hear them. On the top of that, you know, definitely let me know if you want to see me try and do a ghost hunt at Alton Towers. As I was doing my research and kind of looking into a lot of these stories, I did see that there are ghost hunts that are run at Alton Towers. So potential video idea. You know, if you guys want to see that, that could be a pretty funny Halloween video. So yeah, definitely let me know down in the comments below. And without further ado, guys, I hope you have a brilliant rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.